few minutes, and I know some of the parents who took their kids up to see 3 kids will be joining us soon. If you haven't been with us, we've been doing a quick study in the book of Genesis, and we've been here before, but a great summer rewind for us, that in this passage we were talking about, of course, creation. God creates the world and everything's perfect, but about 2.5 chapters in, we're going through what he didn't intend or what he didn't really want to see happen, but the fall, what we call the fall. And sin enters the world through Adam and Eve, and they're deceived by the deceiver who ends up tending us all, even today, toward thinking that the things that God desires least for us are the things that satisfy us most. So God had set up a barrier for us, a rightful barrier for Adam and Eve, and there it was, the deceiver said, oh no, that's exactly what you need. And you think that's just them, it's for us too. We do this all the time. Things in our lives we say, oh, we know that they're not good for us. And yet, somehow, a deception takes place, and we have our minds twisted to the place where we think that what is truly true isn't true anymore. So what happened is there was this creation, there was the fall, and then the flood, this time of reconciliation had begun, that God wanted this bringing together, because what happened was this sin entering the world created a distance between those he created and himself, and he didn't want that. That's not what he desires. He doesn't want that today. He wants all of us to be in close relationship with him. So there it was, creation, the fall, and the flood, and now we enter into the end of Genesis, where we see 4 characters specifically: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. And in the story of Abraham, we use this stool to represent an altar. Now, an altar, as we described, was a place of worship, a place of consecration where I give myself to God. So I worship you, God, I give myself to you, but I also want to encounter you. So either an encounter had already taken place with God and an altar was built in response, or I worship you, God, I offer myself to you, but now I want to hear your voice in my heart. I just want to hear from you. I want to experience you. I want to be in your presence. We sometimes talk about the manifest presence of God. He's just there. So what happened was, Abram at the time, his name was Abram, which meant exalted father, which was ironic because he had no children. And then even more ironic, God gives him, through the upcoming chapters, a name, father of many nations. And in the beginning, though, on this quest, we see that in chapters 12 and 15 and 17, God says to a guy named Abram, I want you to go from your place of comfort. I want you to go to the place that I'm going to show you, and I will bless you. I'll not only bless you, I'll bless your family, and I'll bless all the nations because of you. And we know, looking back on Scripture, that that ultimate blessing was through his family line was the person of Jesus. But here it was, along the way, he was building these altars. So he built literally an altar of praise. Just God, I just want to praise you for providing for me. No, sorry, I want to praise you because you took me through a circumstance which was maybe undesirable, but I know that you're with me. I'm now going to build an altar of prayer, which is, God, not only do I praise you for who you are, but I want to say, I just want to pray, God, I need you for direction. I need to know where you want me to go. I consecrate myself to you, but I want to know where you want me to go. And then he built this altar of peace because he said, God, you have provided me, even in the midst of my enemies, a place of peace, a room in my heart where I can just experience you and know that I'm at rest. And then finally, there was this place of an altar where this was the toughest one, because through the prayers that he had been having with the Lord, these conversations and this ultimate connection that he was having with God, he had made this agreement, yes, you'll be the father of many nations. However, it was difficult because he had no son. And if you know the story, that when he was 100, he and his wife Sarah, who was 90 at the time, had a son. His name was Isaac. After that birth, though, and a few years later, God ultimately had asked him to do something that you and I could never even conceive. He said, I want you to lay your son on the altar and sacrifice him for me. Now, through that, we know that Isaac did survive, especially because we're still talking about him. He has a story of his own. But in this story, Abraham puts his son on the altar, and God, knowing his heart, said, this is exactly what I was looking for. I wanted to hear and see and know your heart. And so he provided a substitute. He provided a ram in the thickets, and that ram in the thickets was sacrificed instead of his own son. And the story goes on that, yes, this fulfillment of this commitment to him had been established. So we have praise, we have prayer, we have peace, and we have provision. We have this place of worship. I worship you, God, but I want to show you with my life that I trust you. And I trust you that you will provide me wisdom when I need it. And I trust you that in the chaos of my life, you will bring peace when I don't know where there's a place for peace. You will be my peace. And I will trust you that when I need something, small or large, whatever I need, you will provide. The story then switched from altars to wells. And the wells were represented by an inverted stool. And this was just a place where you go from worshiping God to a place where now you want to show your worship through God, for God, through your love for others. So I love you, God. I give myself to you, God. But now, what would you like me to do? He tells us what he wants us to do, and then we are to go and do it. That's the hard work. It's easy to be on the mountaintop and just be in God's presence and say, God, you are amazing. But now we know that he has a work for us to do. And so in that work, he has us to dig deep, dig these wells, dig into the scriptures, dig into times of prayer, dig into the spiritual disciplines, getting to know him more, loving him more, seeking him. It talks in the New Testament about searching deep, searching the deep, so that you can have this relationship with him. This isn't a surface relationship with God that he's wanting for us. He wants to have a deep and meaningful relationship with you. And so Isaac, through the series of times in his life, he had gone through unveiling or digging up the wells that had been covered by the enemy. He recast these wells into function. But there was an enemy, Abimelech at the time, who said, you must move on. And so he moved on. He undoes another well that his father had dug, rightly so, and they had worked hard to do so. But the enemies kept pressing them on, and they wanted to fight, and they wanted to argue. And he kept moving on because he said, God will provide for me. He came to a place that was called room. And so, again, an inverted stool in your mind here, he had this place called room, and he built this well. But God asked him to move on one more time. And in the moving, his servants had dug a well. And as they were digging this well, the enemy, who at the beginning, who had caused the friction, and all of those who had been represented along the way being the enemies and the fighters and the arguers wanting to come up against what was rightfully ours, God just said, just keep pressing on and digging wells, because I have something great and a blessing for you. And ultimately, his initial enemy, Abimelech, overseer, great powerful leader, comes to him and says, we see something in you. That as you walk along this journey, we see that God is with you. God teaches us to be a peacemaker in our journey. We don't have to battle, go head to head. God has already won. We stand up for what is true and right, but we don't compromise our integrity to do so. And in the end, the servants' words, the last words that they shared were, we've found water. That's the ultimate excitement for us, that we can search the deep and dig our wells. In everyday life, we can live our lives among our peers, our family members, our workplace correspondents. We go toward our schools and universities, and we interact with people, and we are to be peacemakers. So not only are we to build altars pointing to God, praise, consecrating ourselves to him, and saying, God, what do you want from me? We are to dig wells and say, God, I want to work hard. I want to invest in this relationship. And I know as I dig, it's not that your hard work will gain your salvation. It's not like this gains merit with God. It allows you to go through a process, almost like weightlifting, exercising, and you just build muscle. This is muscle building for your spiritual life, that you dig deep, allowing yourself to build this relationship with God. Well, today, we're going to move on and going from altars to wells to something that we'll call walls. So we talked about Abraham, Isaac. Today, we're going to talk about a guy. His name is Jacob. If you want to follow along, good luck. But it's going to be starting in chapter 25 as we see the death of Abraham. And I'll just reset. So what happens is, we know that story of Abraham and Sarah, and they had a son. His name was Isaac. And then Isaac, if you know the story, at this passage, Abraham actually dies. So Abraham, he dies. And in this, there is this passage where we know that Isaac finds a wife. So before Abraham had died, Sarah had passed away. And there it was that Isaac, at the compulsion of his father, talking to his servant was to go and find a wife for Isaac. And in fact, he does, and her name is Rebekah. So Rebekah comes into the picture, and we have them having a son together. And they have not only one son, they have two sons. And we're going to be starting with this account in chapter 25. It says, Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah. So at this point in time, Abraham and Isaac had now passed on. In verse 21, Isaac prayed. Because she is childless, the Lord answered her prayer, and the babies jostled each other within her. And I want you to listen to this word from the Lord. 2 nations are in your womb. 2 nations are in your womb, Rebekah. And 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and catch this, the older will serve the younger. That was very unusual. The first to come out was red. His name was Esau. So here's mom and dad. And then there was a second son coming very quickly behind, and you probably know his name is Jacob. So the first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment, so they named him Esau. And after this, his brother came out, catch this, with his hand grasping Esau's heel. That's very foretelling. The name Jacob actually means, you could say heel, but it was also in the idiom of Hebrew writing. It was like the deceiver. Hebrew, in writing his name through, was sort of capturing for us that there was something going to happen in their lives where Jacob was going to be a deceiver over Esau. He was going to grab at his heel, and he wanted what he had. I don't know if you've ever thought about someone in a race, and just imagine you standing behind someone in a race. We wouldn't capture their heel to pull them back. We'd probably grab their shirt. It'd sort of be comedic to do so. You grab their shirt to gain leverage to move forward. Well, in this case, he's grabbing his heel, coming up from behind and saying, I want what is yours. What was really in that culture given to the oldest son? It was something called a birthright. And the birthright was given to the oldest son, and that was going to gain privilege, usually in an inheritance form of, maybe monetarily. It may have been position of leadership. There was not only a familial gain, there was a spiritual gain. And what was to come, the blessing that was supposed to come beyond the birthright, was then going to gain them a spiritual position, a prayer that was given by the father. And in this case, Isaac, in the Abrahamic line, the promise given to Abraham that there's going to be this great line. Now comes Isaac, there's going to be this great line. And that line, he gets to choose who is going to then receive the blessing to continue this blessing carrying forward. Now, we've already read that it said that one people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. We already have the foreshadowing to know that Jacob is actually going to take the position of Esau. And that's often when we say these names, we say Jacob and Esau, don't we? But it's really Esau and Jacob in the story. But we're going to see a switch. We're going to see as the story goes on that if we move ahead to the very end of chapter 26, and then you're going to see moving into 27. At this point, Abraham and Sarah had been buried in a very special place. It was in the land of Canaan, and this was in the promised land because they believed they wanted to be buried in the place of promise. They were looking forward and saying, I believe that God is going to provide for us, even beyond our years, that God is going to be a blessing to our family line, and that I want to be in the place of promise. So that's where they were buried. So here it is, Isaac and Rebekah, and here with their children, Esau and Jacob, and you're going to soon learn that there is something going on that's going to show a little bit of favoritism here. It says, when Esau was 40 years old, he married a Hittite. They were a source of grief to Isaac and Rebekah. When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak he could no longer see, he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, my son, here I am. Now remember, he was his favorite. If you know the story, you'll remember the story that there was, in chapter 25, a situation between Esau and Jacob. Do you know that story? That Esau was the hunter and Jacob was the stay-at-home kind of guy. I don't want to say mama's boy, but you know what I mean. He was the one that stayed home with mom and kept pretty close, while Esau went out and did the hunting. And Esau comes back from hunting, and he says, I'm famished. He literally says, I'm starving. How many of you have experienced that in your own family? Your kids have said, I'm starving. You just went, no, you're not. But he was literally starving, he said. And back in that chapter, we see that it says, once when Jacob was cooking, Esau came and he was famished. Quick, let me have some of the red stew. I'm famished. Jacob replied, first, sell me your birthright, that double portion, that leadership option, that extra responsibility gift. Look, I'm about to die, Esau said. What good is a birthright to me? But Jacob said, swear to me first. So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. And Esau despised his birthright. Does it go back to the story in Genesis early on with Adam and Eve where they're in the garden and the enemy comes in and he deceives into thinking that what is really not for you is what you desire the most? That you would trade something of value for something of lesser value or maybe of no value because in the moment it seems that much more important to you. I think both Esau and Jacob experienced that in this moment. Esau traded his birthright, his inheritance, everything that was looking forward to his future for a bowl of stew. You say, well, how did Jacob lose in this deal? Jacob lost his integrity. He challenged his brother and he said, you know what? I see a moment of opportunity where I'm going to deceive my brother. I'm going to take advantage of my brother. And that's not the way, we saw the story of Isaac going through all of those well-digging opportunities. And we said, never in that experience did he lose his integrity. Jacob already is losing his integrity. So there's this push now of favoritism. And Isaac brings Esau into his presence. And he says, I want you to go out to the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like and bring it to me so I can eat it and so that I may give you my blessing before I die. Catch this, that Isaac already knew the word from the Lord. Who was supposed to receive the blessing? Jacob. But his favoritism toward his oldest son and what was normally to be done, it was him that he wanted to bless. And rightly, it makes sense. I get this. But there he sends him off. Now listen to Rebekah. There's this favoritism. There's this pitting against one another. Rebekah was listening. Rebekah said to her son Jacob, listen carefully and do what I tell you. I can prepare some tasty food just the way your father likes it. Then take it to your father to eat so that he may give you his blessing before he dies. Just do what I say. Go. And so she takes he takes Esau's best clothes and puts them on the younger son Jacob and makes him so that in the presence of a very frail and weak-eyed father, that there be a trickery that takes place. That's exactly what happens. Esau goes out into the hunting field. Rebekah then goes her own way to make things happen, and Jacob comes into Isaac's presence. And you, I think, probably knows the story. My son, bring me some of the game to eat so that I may give you my blessing. And Isaac blessed him. Here's the prayer. May God give you heaven's dew and earth's riches, an abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed. You hear the spiritual blessing that he's received, that he's just taken from his brother? He knows what he's doing. And yet he believes in the moment that that lie is going to serve him well. Well, he goes back, and there it is, and he's with his mother, and he thinks he's successful. His brother comes back from the fields and says, Father, I have exactly what you're asking for. Can you now bless me? And the problem is, in this moment, the father realizes that there's been a deception. And he can't give the same blessing. In fact, I'm sorry, I only have one blessing, really, but I will pray for you. I will bless you, but it won't be what you want to hear. Here's the blessing. Your dwelling will be away from the earth's riches, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck. Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing that his father had given him. And he said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are near, which means he is about to die. And when he dies, I will kill my brother Jacob. At that moment, there was a separation that had just taken place, a wall, if you like, that had been built between Jacob and Esau. Well, Rebekah, realizing that if something isn't done, Jacob's dead man. And she goes to her husband and says, you know how Esau has been marrying these foreign women? I don't want that for our son. She's making up some excuse whereby she can go and have him move away, even to her brother Laban's house, so that he can find a wife. And so she convinces her husband. And so Isaac literally blesses Jacob and says, it's time for you to go. It's time for you to go. And so he does go. And he makes his way. And now he's separated from his father. So he's there almost on his way, but on the way, on this journey, he comes to a place where he wants to find rest. In fact, he takes out a rock, and he then has a rest here. And he has a dream. It says Jacob, in partway through chapter 28, Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. And when he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking out one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it, and there above it stood the Lord. And he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. Do you hear how God is completing the story from Abraham to Isaac and now to Jacob? He's reminding him, all peoples on the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. What is Jacob's response? When Jacob woke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place. Surely the Lord is in this place. And I was not aware of it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? Early the next morning, Jacob took that stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar, and he poured oil upon it, and he called that place Bethel or Bethel. And Jacob makes a vow, and you'll notice it's a bit conditional. Have you ever done this when you pray to God? If God will be with me, and if he will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear so that I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God. He's still working his way through this relationship. He's starting to dig, but he's not dug very deep yet. He's still digging. So Jacob continues on his journey through the open country, and he makes his way to the land of Laban. And there he meets, in that place, he says, does anyone know where Laban lives? Well, yeah, we do, and there's his daughter. Her name is Rachel. Oh, it was a pretty cool start for this relationship. He saw her, and it was a bit awkward because the very first thing he does is he kisses her. And he knows that this is a special relationship that he's going to have. In fact, he goes, and in this story, to make it a little bit quick, he meets up with Laban. Laban hugs him. He realizes he's part of his family. And I'm not sure culturally how this works in my mind. It just works here. You just got to go with it. That here he is going to his uncle Laban's house, and he's saying, you know what? I over a course of a short period of time, he realizes how much he loves Rachel. He said, I want to marry her and make her my wife. Well, that's fine. You just have to work for me for a while. 7 years. I'll do that. 7 years will feel like 7 days because I think so much of her. And so it was, the time passed, and the time came for him to marry this daughter, Rachel. And Rachel was certainly ready to be married. And yet, Laban had another daughter. Her name was Leah. And so in a moment of trickery, there was a wedding that took place. And again, I wasn't there and don't know exactly how this takes place. But there is a bit of a veil of secrecy that happens, I think, during the wedding and on wedding night. And there it was, that there was a consummation of a wedding. But he didn't realize until the next morning that he had married Leah. Unsatisfied, obviously, by this news, he goes to Laban again and he says, what has gone wrong? I worked for you for 7 years. Laban, who is a good match for the deceiver over here, says, I have an idea. Why don't you work for me for 7 more years, and then we can work out a deal. Well, just a few days later, in promise of those 7 years, he was able to marry Rachel. So as the story goes on, the lovely part is that they have lots of children. In fact, if you know the story of Jacob, you know he has 12 sons. 4 were born to Leah after a time when she couldn't bear children. After the time that she couldn't bear children anymore, after those 4 children, she had a maidservant who gave birth to 2 children. She then was able to conceive again, had 2 more children. And then in the go of all of this, there were 10 children that were born not to Rachel. But finally, God blesses Rachel. And do you know what her firstborn son's name was? Joseph. Joseph, which is a story of continuation where we'll go next week. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. There was even a daughter. Her name is Dinah that was born to Leah in this mix. So now they have 11 sons. And here we are a little later on the story, and the flocks are increasing. Jacob's work on this farm, or on this crop of this herd, this field, this building of an establishment, an inheritance, he's doing very well. But he finds over a series of years that he has his children, and he wants to return home. And so, with the account of incorporating conversation with his favorite wife, Rachel, they come up with a scheme, in a sense, for leaving Laban. And so they do leave Laban, and they leave him behind. See, in this go, they've now chosen that whatever it is that I lost my integrity for in my conversations and interactions with Esau, it was at the time seemed worth it, but now there's a wall. Whatever it was with my father Isaac, whatever deception that I had with him, I figured at the time was worth it, but it created a wall. And now with Laban, I've met my match in Laban, and Laban was not fully wholesome, but at the same time, there was some deception going on. And not to go too far into the story, there was some deception on how Isaac was able to build his flock without Laban knowing that he was being robbed. And he figured at the time that that was worth it. But all it was creating a wall. And what he didn't really realize at the time was at the very same time, there was a wall being built that was separating him from God. So you'll notice at this time that Jacob is here, and it's almost like he's living in a prison. He's now separated because of his lies. Remember, his name is Deceiver. He's living up to his name. He's now separated himself a little bit from God because he's in an if-then scenario with him. He's still building a relationship with God, but there's sort of a break in the action here. And what happens when walls are here and the relationships are outside of those walls? You feel what? Alone. God never intended for any of us to feel alone. So there it was that he and his family had gone, and in fact, Laban had come after him, and he said, I wanted to come and I wanted to do harm to you because of what you've done to me. You've taken my family without even allowing me to kiss my grandchildren and say goodbye to my own children. But the Lord came to me in a dream and said, I'm not to harm you or hurt you. And they created a peace treaty, but they were still separate. If we move ahead, and this is sort of the key of the passage in chapter 32. He's at a place now where he's realizing the losses that he has. That there is separation because of the walls that have been built, because of his own lies and deception. But now he says, I think that there's something that needs to take place. And what happens is, we get to a place in our life when we're at the very bottom of things, and we have to wrestle with God. We need to wrestle through faith. We need to wrestle through our identity. We have to say, what is it that I believe in? What is it I'm willing to fight or die for? And what is it that I think that I am called? Like, what is my name? Jacob's at a moment where he's realizing my name is Deceiver. Maybe I am a liar. Maybe I am a wall builder. He's now at the point where he's going home. He's still thinking he's going to have an opportunity to see his mother and father, not even yet knowing that they're dead. So he goes, and that night he's realizing that I have to come upon my brother Esau's territory to get home. I've got to face the lie. I've got to face the wall. I've got to face the deception. And so that night, he's realizing I've got to send some gifts ahead to my brother so I can pacify him. So Jacob's gift went on ahead of him, but he himself spent the night in the camp. He sends his family. He sends the gifts ahead. He's trying to establish a reestablish relationship. He's trying to make right what was wrong. And he doesn't really know how to do this, but God helps him in the journey. That night, Jacob got up, and he took his 2 wives and his 2 female servants and his 11 sons and crossed the ford to the Jabbok. And after he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. And now Jacob was alone. Let's read the story. This is very important. And a man wrestled with him till daybreak. A man wrestled with him till daybreak. We know, looking back on Scripture, we know that he's wrestling with the Lord. Have you ever wrestled with the Lord? When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched, and he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So there he is in the place of conflict, discouragement, despair. He's in this place of wrestling with God because I don't want to be in this prison any longer. He says, "I will not go unless you bless me. I will not go unless you help me break these walls." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. "Deceiver, heel catcher, wall builder." Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob. No longer will your name be Jacob." And at that point, the wall was broken. No longer will your name be Jacob. And so now, he said, "I want to give you a new name." And he did give him a new name. And that name was very meaningful because it means wrestle with God. The name that he gave him was special because it says, no longer are you going to be in the walls of prison. No longer are you going to be in this place where you don't understand. The faith that you have is not circumstantial. It is now that you are named Israel. And because you have wrestled with me, you are now an overcomer. The idea of Israel means overcoming, wrestling, being with God in such a way that he gives you a new name. And I think some of us are still living in the lies of our old name. What's happening is there's now a tearing down of the walls when we make ourselves right with God. Over time, there seems to be this breaking down of the walls that we have with the deception that we've created with other people. We want to build relationships back. We want to restore what has been broken in the same way that God takes what is broken on the side, curb cleanup, and he redeems, and he restores, and he renews. That's what he wants to do, and he wants to do that with you. And the only way to do that is when we wrestle with God. When we search for the deep, when we dig deep into the places where we say, I don't want to take on my earthly name anymore. I want to have my Father's name. I don't want to be the deceiver anymore. I want to be the one who's wrestled with God and been called an overcomer. And so it was that after that took place, Israel's life was certainly not perfect. He still had fears. He still fell down. And yet he had a new name and a new position with God. And this is what he does. He goes on from that place of wrestling with him. And then he goes and he says, Jacob called that place where he wrestled with God Peniel, or Peniel, saying, it is because I saw God face to face. The sun rose above him as he crossed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. And therefore, to this day, the Israelites don't eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon. Did you know that? It was because of that very activity. He meets his brother. He's feared out of his life. He's just had this relationship with God restored, and yet he's still fearful of this encounter with his brother. But it goes way better than expected. And after Jacob arrived safely at the city of Shechem in Canaan, after he had come in contact with his brother for whom he was separated from because of a wall that he had built, that relationship was restored. They hugged and kissed each other, mended that relationship. And it was part of that journey that would only have come had he wrestled with God. It closes like this. After Jacob came from Paddan Aram, he arrived safely at the city of Shechem in Canaan and camped within sight of the city. And for 100 pieces of silver, he bought for the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, the plot of ground where he pitched his tent. And there he set up an altar, a place of praise, and said, God, I worship you. I now offer myself fully to you. It's not conditional anymore. What would you like me to do? I think for us, we need to learn a little bit from Abraham and Isaac and Jacob to understand that he wants us to build altars, and he wants us to dig wells. He wants us to go deep with him. But he also wants us to take account of the lies that have built walls in our lives and say, what do I need to do with you? What do I have to wrestle with you about in order that I might tear those walls down? Maybe today you're living with some of those walls. And I hope this story will encourage you to know that you too can be an overcomer. What is your spiritual name? What is your spiritual name? Father, those things that have crept into our lives, fear and shame and blame, that have built walls in our lives because we thought if we just overcome them with our deception and our lies, that's going to be better, and yet we know very clearly that that's not the case. Will you help us to see those areas in our own lives? Will you help us to have the courage to come to you, and when we're in a field and we can't shout your name, Jesus, that you will take our lips, that we will wrestle with you in such a way that we won't leave this place until you let us pronounce and shout your name, Jesus, 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 that we might be overcomers and do what exactly it is that you've called us to do, worship in spirit and in truth. May we love you, God, love others fully, and may it be that we just take on the persona of Jesus, because that's who you want us to be in this world, more like you. We praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. I'm going to invite Martin and Frank to come back to play one more song. And as we're doing that, just want to be praying for you, let you know that after the service, if there's any of you that are really thinking this through and saying, I think there are some things that I need to wrestle through, and you think that we can just pray with you and that would be an encouragement, I'd love to do that, and I'll make some time for that after the service. I'd be happy to meet with you. Just come down.